am so glad that you clicked on this episode, Overcoming Weight Loss Resistance. I have an expert on the show today, and we dive into it all, and we are here to help you. Tanja is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, kinesiologist, mindset coach, and she has been helping others improve their health since 2004. She combines functional lab testing, personalized wellness protocols, and mindset coaching to help women overcome the root cause of their food and weight struggles so they can reach healthy, happy body weight without the obsession. Sounds like a great fit for the Love Your Life show, right? She hosts the Fit and Vibrant You podcast, which I will have links to in the show notes because that is an amazing place to go to get some support from her. When she's not working, she loves being outdoors, spending time with her husband and son. And she also loves a slow morning with a good cup of coffee and her cats. Thank you for tuning in. I think you will get a lot out of this conversation, and I am so excited for you to listen. Let us know your big takeaways on Instagram or by emailing us. Thank you very much, and let's welcome her to the show. All right, and welcome to the Love Your Life show. Tanja, thank you so much for coming on again.
You know what? It's been a while, 2 or 3 years now, I think. So time goes by so super fast. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I will put the link to our past episode in the show notes because that was a listener favorite. You have a way of speaking and supporting us that fits really well in with the warrior tribe. It's like kind, supportive, caring, tone plus like some like kick in the pants.
A little kick in the butt, a little call yourself out a little bit, which is sometimes the best form of self-love is to call yourself out on your own BS.
I love it. So in a nutshell, if people are just listening to the first episode and they're going to go back and listen to other episode, can you explain to new listeners what you do and how you help and support people?
Yeah. So I help women, especially in midlife and beyond. I like to say, get to your happy, healthy body weight naturally, permanently, and without the obsession. And I do help women who also don't have weight to lose and don't want to lose weight, but also have like gut issues and other things. Or sometimes you are at your ideal body weight, but you still have food obsession or this sort of perfectionism around food. And so it's not actually ever related to just weight loss. That was my story. I started my first diet when I was 20. I went into this like really obsessive nature with food for quite a while. And it really just like, I was in the diet prison, like everything was about the weight and the number on the scale and double workouts and trying to always like resist and be good and then not being able to like stick with it and having these, these episodes of just overeating and feeling kind of, really crappy about yourself. And at the same time I was a personal trainer and you work with other people who are very personally, because it's all one-on-one and at the time, and a lot of people knew what to do, but they were just struggling with something else. And I really wanted to dive into the missing link between like, well, knowing and doing, and then also doing it in a way where it doesn't feel so restrictive, so hard. So like what we think about exhausting, like when we think about like dieting. But at the same time, I also respect that a lot of people, when people do want to lose weight, and sometimes there's these few camps out there where it's like, well, food freedom, eat whatever you want, and your body, like, which is fine, but it's also okay to want to lose weight. And I think it can be done in a way that is sustainable, a way that really comes from a place of loving yourself. And we have to look at all aspects of the equations, from the habits, from our thoughts to our beliefs, and what's happening with our hormones and all of it.
Yes. I'm like, yes, please.
Yes, all of that.
Talking. I'm like, all that. You said something in the beginning there. You said you help people with food obsession and food perfectionism or food perfectionist thinking. How would someone, like, what are some signs that you might have perfectionist thinking around food? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So we often think about like the thing as in like, well, tracking every macronutrient, every macro, or weighing yourself every day is like obsessive, or weighing your food. And that's not necessarily obsessive. It's more your relationship to it. Just like, you talk about the thought model quite a bit, and, the scale is neither good or bad. It's how we, our relationship to it. Just like a kitchen knife can either make a beautiful meal or can kill somebody. It's how we use it. And so I think it's more of like, and this is where I think honesty has to come in. it's your level of the like mental energy that you're spent on these things. And also, is it coming from a place of like, actual like love for yourself or fear? And this is a really tough one to sometimes get. And not to say like, because sometimes we do things because you're like, well, if I don't go for my walk, I know I'm going to be like, I'm not going to feel good, or I know I'm like, it's a slippery slope that way. And so it's not one or the other. It's like completely wrong to do things out of like getting away from something that you don't want. But often we try to fix ourselves and like bully ourselves into a better body versus coming from a place of actually genuinely wanting to take care of ourselves. And there's just a little bit of a different energy there. So it's not so much about the what you're doing, because you can count macros. You can weigh every single piece of food you eat if you want to, and it might not be obsessive. It's like for some people who are vegans, like they have that's a restriction, but it's not, it's not obsession. It's just, I mean, it could be, but it could just be like, I just don't eat meat.
That awareness that like, it's sort of, I mean, if we're thinking of the thought model, it's like the action can look the same, but it's the energy from which you're taking.
Exactly.
That bullying play. You better go take a walk because you suck if you don't.
Exactly.
So like, yeah, it's the nicest thing for me to do. Even though I don't feel like doing it right now, I know it's going to help me.
Totally. And that's exactly it. It's about changing our perspective on things, and also being open that not like it would make my life so much easier if I had like one straight plan, like everyone should do it this way. And it does not work that way. Like, I just really don't see it working that way, because some of my clients, like there are some coaches out there who just like, they talk so down about food journaling, online food journals and counting calories and stuff. But for some people who with a very analytical mind, that actually can work quite well for somebody. And it's actually a great tool to bring awareness. And maybe it's not of a like always trying to race to the bottom of eating as little as possible, but maybe you want to track to see if you're eating enough, protein or potassium or things like that. So it's really like, I'm more, like you said, when you're on my podcast, like I'm with you, I'm on your team. Like, and it's about figuring what's going to work for you. It's not about being so dogmatic on the specific rules, because I don't think there is one way. I mean, you look at any program out there and there is going to be success stories. There's going to be people like, this worked for me, it was awesome. And there's people that are like, that didn't work for me at all, which is okay. It's about finding it kind of what works for you.
I mean, and just from like if we broaden our lens a bit, this is where women historically have gotten into trouble, is looking externally for the answers for our individual self. Like, what's the right school for me, or what's the right husband for me, or what do my parents think about this house? Like looking externally for that internal fit. And again, that's a lot of our, younger years of dieting. Like, oh, okay, they say this will work, I'll do it. And we push past the part where our body is screaming, or we're totally in resistance every morning. We're not in the analytical mind. So writing food down really takes joy from us. I really like this topic for, a lot of the Love Your Life listeners. We are entering, 30s and 40s and beyond. And midlife is all about, instead of outside in living, it's more inside out. And like, what works for me? Like, how does it actually feel? Like, what are my thoughts about getting on a scale? No matter what the two of us say, like, how does that, like, oh, you know what? It actually like grounds me for the day and centers me, and like is a really, or it's like, it's the worst thing ever. But getting away from that right or wrong, I really appreciate.
Totally. And the scale is a great example. I mean, there are people out there, there are coaches out there who use the thought model, and their approach is just very much like, well, everyone should weigh themselves and just work on your thoughts. And that's like perhaps one approach, and that could work too. But for some people, like there could be phases too, where if that scale has so much power over you, I actually find it more helpful to take a break from it and just to focus on like, well, how do I feel? And be more intuitive with like, am I hungry? Have I had enough? What foods make me feel good? And just let that piece go and not let it be the measure of success. And then maybe, I mean, when I really ditched the diet kind of mindset, I took a long break from the scale. And now I weigh myself regularly. And it's just like, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
like that's it. And if it ever did get it to be a big thing, then I would either take a break, or I would do some more of the thought work and just sort of start to question some of the things I'm thinking, and to see if I still want to think those thoughts, or maybe there's other truths that I could practice instead.
Well, again, that's returning to our own inner authority. And I do find that that's sometimes where the thought model is used as a weapon. Like, it's like, well, yes, as you said in the beginning, a scale is just, it's neutral, same like a kitchen knife. Like, we can think thoughts that make the kitchen knife bad or good. We can make that think thoughts, but I'm always like, is it worth you want to be doing right now? Like, we have lots of
Totally.
areas in our life where we can work on how we feel around things. Like, is it work worth doing? I say, like, do you want to put the energy in to feel better about the scale? Okay, then that's what you can do right now. But like, for me right now, I don't. I'm just like, no, I'm good not weighing myself. I don't know the last time I've stepped on a scale. It doesn't take up much of my mental energy. If I wanted to do the work and get into this place where I'm gonna, sure. But again, it's like, what works for us, and getting back to that sort of inner knowing.
Totally. And also in the season of your life, because there might be a time where, you do want to focus a bit more. And sometimes, well, that could be a tool and it might be worth the effort. And sometimes we're like, no, and it may not
Right.
ever. And that's, and
Yeah.
it's all, I think just, it's all okay. And there's so many different ways. And also not to be married to one specific thing. Like, you could decide for months or
Yeah.
years not to step on the scale. And then you can decide to weigh yourself, which is fine too. You
Yeah,
can
it's like,
decide.
I think of, like, I like saying, like, shoulder shrug living. It's like, yeah, right now I'm not doing that. It's like, it's okay. Or like for me, everyone's like, you need to get an Apple Watch. I'm like, right now, like, I know myself. I think I would get obsessive around like the circles and the like, and I'm like, I'm not going to do it. Maybe I will some other time. Like, but it's this, like, not making a big deal about it. Not bringing what we often bring as women, this like layer of judgment and worth.
Yep.
It's like, it's just a freaking scale. It's okay. And it's a number. And I love your point, because when you said that, like, there probably were other times in our life where we did weigh ourselves. I know I weighed myself through my pregnancy, and it was a very, like, I was like, oh, yay, I'm 4 pounds heavier. Like, the baby's growing. And, it was just a very interesting mindset that is, and I was looking at it much more from a health standpoint that is different than what we're doing when we're doing the dieting. So I really appreciate your, like, just the openness to look at, like, how do you feel about it, whatever it is, and then to move forward from there. So for women who maybe think, they're like, yeah, I'm trying this, like, guys, like, I'm trying these things. I feel like I'm doing everything, that other people say is right, but I'm not losing the weight. I'm not, I'm struggling to lose the weight. How do you help them with that? I see.
Oh, so much. And so, when I started, I think when we had our interview together originally, it was in 2020, I really started an online coaching program to help really with the food obsession and becoming more peaceful with food. And I call it like getting to your happy, healthy weight. And what happened is that for so many women, like, they actually stopped caring about their weight, honestly. And so they lost weight, maybe some slowly, some a little bit faster. And I actually realized that it wasn't really a big deal anymore, which is beautiful and freeing. And they would still lose weight, but just, it didn't matter so much.
Yeah.
But then some women didn't. And they would like have a great mindset, and they would do lots of things right, and they just would not get results. And so I wanted to dive more into the body science piece, because that's also important, right? Because if you can do all the right things, all the mindset work, but if you're not doing the right program or the protocol for you, you can still not get the results that you want. And not necessarily just from a weight loss perspective, but also like your energy or how you're feeling. And there's so much more that goes into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did my training. So now I can incorporate, and I don't do this for everyone, because not everyone needs it, but I can look at hormones, I can look at gut health, I can look at immune function, just different things that could be getting in the way of what we call kind of weight loss resistance. But the first thing is to really be honest with yourself, because sometimes we're like, well, I'm not losing weight, or what worked for me is no longer working for me. But that doesn't mean that it's anything's wrong. It just means that, well, what worked in your 20s and 30s might not work in your 40s and 50s and 60s. And that's kind of just the way it is. Our bodies do change, but there are, at the root of it, in order to lose weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit. And they talk about, you'll hear things like, oh, it's not about calories in, calories out anymore. And that's one way of looking at it, but it kind of still is. Like, you have to, at some point, be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. But the thing that we kind of, I think, miss is that calories in and calories out is not just the food that we're eating and the amount that we're exercising. There's so much more that goes into it. And so it could be things like, well, first of all, like, are you doing the things that, are you like, picking and snacking? Are you doing like the extracurricular eating? Are you kind of doing called the BLTs, the bite, licks, and tastes of all like the little, snacking? And I know I do that too. Like I'm making a smoothie and there's like peanut butter. I'm like, like I love a spoonful of peanut butter. It's so good.
Yeah.
But I know like if I wanted to lose weight, if I did want to lose weight, like those are the kind of things that I know for myself, I would have to be more conscious about. And right now it's like, I'm mindful-ish, but it's not like my number one priority at this point in my life right now either. But there's a couple things. So one, and honestly, I didn't realize this was as big of a problem as I see it now, but is long-term calorie restriction. And there are women who have been trying to like survive on like a 1,400 calorie a day diet for years and often don't because they do it for a little while, then they probably like overeat over the weekends. And so like technically they're probably not in a calorie deficit, but it's because they're just trying to go so long or sorry, so low for so long. And what happens when you are in this long-term calorie deficit is that, well, first of all, you feel great at the beginning because your body runs on cortisol, which is our stress hormone. It feels great.
Oh my God.
But it also downregulates your thyroid production, your metabolism. And over time, it actually can downregulate your cortisol production as well. And so you increase, like when you calorie restrict, you increase cortisol, you increase adrenaline, you decrease the conversion of your inactive to your active thyroid hormone. And that's a hormone that's going to be important for metabolism and for like your digestion. And actually there are thyroid hormone receptors on every single cell of your body. Like it affects everything, your sex hormones, your skin, your hair, like everything. It's amazing, but it downregulates that. So that's a big thing. And and then you get frustrated because you're not losing weight. And so what do? You try to go on this like really restrictive diet again.
More,
and
right?
So, and it becomes a race to the bottom, and then your body just downregulates. It's like I was listening to this other podcast. They had this great little analogy. It's like if you're always like running on the treadmill and you're not eating enough, and our bodies, I mean, we've been surviving for many, many decades, and or many, many thousands of years. We haven't been in this kind of world we are in right now where we have food all the time and we are kind of safe, and our body still thinks that we're going to be unsafe. So if you're always running from something and you're not eating enough food, your body's going to naturally downregulate because she wants you to survive. And so it's not your body fighting against you, it's your body just doing what nature intended, and that is to help you survive. And so a big part of that is, I recommend just starting, if you think that might be you, this is where actually tracking can be helpful. Not from a place of like, oh, I need to eat less, but just see where you're at and track for a good 2 to 3 weeks just to get an average for the week, because sometimes we were really good Monday to Thursday or Monday to Friday, and then we go all out on the weekends because we can't like upkeep the same level of calories restricted that we try to do. So that's a good place to start. Just to see where you're at. And then sometimes the first step is to really start to increase your calories. And this could be really frightening, and sometimes can lead to a little bit of weight gain too, which is also really frightening, but necessary if you want to just get your metabolism back up again. And if you do it really slowly, you're less likely to gain lots of weight, like, quite slowly over time. But that's something you can do. And that's a great example of, again, where tracking might be a nice thing to do, because otherwise we kind of like, well, I think I'm eating enough, or I think but we don't really know. And of course you can like, not track accurately and stuff, but if you kind of just do the best you can and just get just for awareness.
Yeah. Well, I love how, like you said, the first step really is honesty. And I think I just want to really like underline that for listeners, that not only honesty with like us telling ourselves, because that's a really frustrating place to be. It's like, I'm doing everything and I'm not losing weight. It's like, okay, but let's like really look at that. Like, are you getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep 7 days a week? Like, what's happening there? And are you moving your body for 30 minutes, every day? Where are your BLTs? What are you,
Yeah.
like, extracurricular eating? I love how you put it, like some honesty there. And then also honesty in this, because what normally happens, and I think as we hit midlife, the cycle might happen faster, is that we start with this like, okay, Monday morning, and here I am with my grapefruit and whatever nonsense we're telling ourselves we need to eat, and but then by Thursday, we're, hand in the bag of chips and we're feet up and we have like ice cream next coming up on the menu. And it's so I like how you say like those 2 to 3 week windows. I also want to bring focus to the listeners, how you spoke of your body. You said she just wants you to survive. Like that's the kind of mindset that I think is super helpful for us to get into as, I wish I was in it when I was 14, but as I'm aging too, it's not me against my body, which is a lot of the mindset I had of like, oh my God, I have to, restrict and control. But it's like, oh my God, okay, like my body is storing extra energy for me because it knows my pattern that I've been doing of starving it. And then, and then it needs energy. It knows that my brain needs energy to think. It knows that I like to be able to think well. So it's storing this energy and it's not doing anything wrong. And I need to
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that's such a huge part, because when we come at it from this place of like, and it's a stress too. Like we talk about lowering stress, like we're always like in this fight against ourselves. And when you recognize like, yeah, your body is like, I think of like our body as like, she's fighting so hard for us, and she always has been. And she, even things like we think about diseases or autoimmune diseases and things like that, still your body is trying to protect it. It's still the body just, sometimes it's from like just not like repressed emotions, or it's just it's just there's things that are happening in your body that it's trying, it's really, really trying, and it's really there for you. And that's just gives you a more of a peaceful, I think, approach to all of it. So you don't feel so like I need to again bully myself into a better body or fight myself. And it's just it's a whole different way of looking at it. And that's actually another reason why it can be quite nice to look at things like, well, how, what am I doing for the 3 weeks, or 2 or 3 weeks in terms of how much am I eating? And or when I do get to do the labs and look at hormones and actually what's happening underneath in the body with my clients, it also gives a little bit more of an understanding of the imbalances that are happening. And it kind of starts to give more compassion with yourself, and it helps to just guide your focus away from just like trying to like lose weight all the time to get to this place of healing. Because sometimes there are like, well, you look at someone's cortisol pattern and it's like, well, no wonder you feel the way you feel and you don't have the energy to do things because like your cortisol is like, in the toilet, or sometimes you have gut, imbalances, or sometimes there's sex hormone imbalances, things like that, inflammation, poor liver function. Those are the kind of things that can sometimes just inhibit your body wanting to lose weight. And that's just the physical side of things. And the physical side of things are often repercussions of what's happening, from long-term, emotional eating or diet restriction, or, past traumas and stories and, all these kind of things.
Well, and it's the physical side, but it's also like, I feel like as we get to midlife, it's sort of this like, oh, maybe there is this connection between my mind and body. Like we're being told these things, but we're just like, I don't want to hear it. Like I'm just going to keep calorie restricting and exercising, and then it's going to come off. And then finally we're like, maybe the stress that I am carrying and running around doing everything for everyone and thinking everyone's, feeling states are my problem and my responsibility, like carrying that cortisol in my body. Maybe that's why, my sweet body trying to care for myself is developing this autoimmune disorder. That's why my body is, cortisol running so high affects, as you said, like the metabolism and the thyroid function. It is, I mean, alcohol, like there are all these things that as we get older, and we don't want to see them. But part of this, like learning about ourselves and acceptance of ourselves and loving our whole selves, where it's like, wait a minute, like honesty about, yes, what we're eating, but also honesty about where are we racing so hard to live someone else's lives or to worry about someone else's worries and how is that impacting us? Like returning back to our true self-care.
Totally. It's like, you think of all these kind of things, and eventually it's like, if you think about why we're doing all this, eventually it's like, because I want to be happy at some point, or I want to feel good.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait a second, I could just do that right now.
Right.
It's like, oh, that's wonderful. No, it's, and
which I guess, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I guess that's why you said some of your clients sort of like the weight doesn't matter anymore. Cause that's what I find too. It's like, when we're realizing, it's like if we're thinking the thought, oh, if I weigh XYZ, I'm going to be happy. we're sort of in this, model that we know doesn't work. But if we're like, okay, why don't I just start getting happy now
Mhm.
and fixing these things now, then
Mhm.
the weight doesn't matter so much. And it starts
And
coming.
well, eventually it often does start coming off because when we're happy and we like, I mean, you can emotionally eat when you're happy too, and everything like that, of course.
Oh,
Um, but I love like that you can, this idea that when you love yourself, when you feel good about yourself, you also want to take care of yourself.
mm,
And natural or weight loss can be the natural consequence of you just doing the things that take care, that you're doing to take care of yourself, which I think is really, really powerful.
I
And
wrote down, you have a quote, let weight loss be the natural
natural
consequence of
consequence.
taking care of you.
Yeah. And
Like,
I think that's
oh,
a great way to do it. And it just takes the pressure off because when I wake up in the morning and I think like, oh, today's the day, like I have to lose weight or I'm losing weight, like it's just kind of just this pressure. But when you think about like you want to feel good, you want to have energy, you want to take care of yourself, it's so much more inspiring, which I really
mm,
like. And, I think I mean, I work with mostly women over like in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I think we get to a certain point too where we just realize, like, whether it is sort of mortality motivation or we stop caring about everything else so much, or we're going through a different season where we're just like, well, now's the time, like, I got to take care of myself. But the things that we did in our 20s and 30s, we often think, like, well, it worked for me then. And I would argue it probably never really did. It's just
mm,
that you had more bank account reserves. So you're like, if you think about the bank account analogy where you have all the reserves and all the money in it, and then you keep withdrawing, eventually you're going to go bankrupt. And
mhm,
usually it takes until you're like, your 40s and 50s to notice that. But the process was happening all the time.
mm.
And this is why it'd be so wonderful if everyone could start in their teens, their 20s and 30s. And I have pretty good hope for like this generation
So do
now. Like I think that
yeah.
they're doing a lot better of taking care of themselves than I mean, I think I did too, but I think they're even better.
Yeah, they're aware of it. Yeah, well, I love this again, this like taking care of yourself, letting weight loss be the natural consequence of taking care of you. And what keeps coming up for me is what you sort of started with, is this honesty. And again, the honesty of like taking care of you. What really is taking care of you is, when we're telling ourselves, I know I used to, when I was a young mom, I was like, oh, and now, I'm having a treat of ice cream. Like, this is like at the night, finally I get to eat, all the, like, that's a treat for me. But honestly, is that a treat? Or, is it more of a treat to not have the bloated stomach at night, because me and dairy don't go well together? Is it more of a treat for me to be able to button up my pants the next day? Is it more of a treat for me to say, you know what, like, I had the amount that I was going to have and then I didn't overeat that? Or like, where's the actual
Totally.
self-care and treat
Yeah.
for
And
me?
this is where the honesty is really so important. And then we start to really zoom out and think in complete thoughts, because the one thought is like, yeah, I like ice cream. I deserve it. I've been good all day. I've had such a hard day, all the things, which are all truths. Like, you have a hard day. You do deserve a treat. Like, and ice cream is a convenient treat. All that's true. But you're right. We often miss out on the full truth. Is like, oh, well, you know what else is true is I'm gonna feel better tomorrow if
Mhm.
I don't have it. Or what else is true is like, what I actually want is just to rest and relax and to like
Mm.
have some time to myself, or to experience a big one is a pleasure. We have
Yeah.
a hard need for pleasure, and we often don't give it to ourselves. And food is pleasurable, and yeah, and not, and it should be, I want it to be, but if it becomes the only source of pleasure, then it becomes just a bigger piece of that pie, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that. I love, like, because you mentioned emotional eating earlier, and I'm not sure, like, I don't know if I ever want to stop emotionally eating. I just want
Mm.
to do it consciously. So if it is this, like, at the end of the day and I am tired, and what do I want? Like, what, is pausing to ask myself. That's something that we're often trained as women to be selfless and have no needs and desires. And it's like, well, actually, we have needs and desires. That's not us being selfish. That's us being human. What do I want? Okay, well, I want a bit of a break, or I want a treat. Okay, ice cream is one treat, and maybe having a bowl of ice cream is a treat for me, and I'm going to choose it consciously. I'm always going to feel better. If another treat might be to sit with my book and read, or to play a card game with my husband, or like, what I'm hearing you say is we want more options. than just the food. What I found in
Yes.
my own personal experience when I was looking at it and also looking at women is that food is like a socially acceptable treat for women to have. Same with alcohol. It's like, I'm going to have a glass of wine at the end of the night. Like, that's a treat. That's better than, us maybe saying like, no, husband, you know what a real treat for me would be is to sit alone in the other room with my book. Like, and it's like, no, okay, I'll sit here and overeat or because food is an acceptable option. And we just want to broaden that toolbox. I see you about ready to say something.
Yeah, well, you said two things that I think were so powerful. So one is this idea that, we often have to think that, oh, emotional eating is bad. And we need like, and even in marketing, I'm sure I've said it too, like, stop emotional eating and how to overcome emotional eating. And there is no place where we ever need to get to where we don't emotionally eat anymore. You're right. Like, I will emotionally eat. I will use food as treats. I will use food as rewards. It doesn't mean I'm a dog. I've seen that on social. I'm like, that's just rude. Come on. Like,
I mean, I went to San Diego with my son and we just went out for tacos and it was like just such a joyful experience eating with it. And I love that. And it was, yeah.
And emotionally eating works. Like, sometimes our emotions are big and sometimes we just need a little bit of a break from it. But you're right. It's about being more aware, being more conscientious, and then not having that be the only way you cope. And I think that's the thing. Like, I like the idea of crowding out versus taking away. So it's not like, oh, I'm trying to like restrict or take away my emotions. Or my emotional eating. I'm trying to give myself more tools so that, once in a while I do, but it's not the only thing. And the other thing you said there about, the idea of like going to another room just to read your book is so often that we use food, we overeat, we keep eating, we prolong our meals because we need a break. Like, and that's it. Yes. But we don't feel worthy of taking a break, or maybe not some worthiness, but we don't feel like we deserve it. We don't think that it's like, it's something that we can do or get to do, or it feels too indulgent or selfish or something like that along those lines. And so we eat because eating is doing something. We're not hungry.
It's like official. It's like, I'm having a snack instead of,
I'm taking a break and totally. And, or sometimes we think we don't have time to take a break, so we eat. And so we're eating, which takes time as well. And what you could also do is just like sit there and relax. Or sometimes we keep eating after we've had enough because we don't do, like, the next thing we do after eating is like something that we don't want to do anymore anyway. And so you can also like just do something joyful after, if you can, after your meals, and just, things like that. Because I really do think that the more we meet our own needs, like what we truly need, which sometimes like is going to be like, yeah, I want that like sensible ice cream, or either like, and I will never eat chocolate when I'm hungry. Like, chocolate is not something I eat when I'm hungry. It's the idea. Like, there are gonna be times where you eat when you're not hungry, and it's like, it'll be chocolate which is fine. But when you meet your needs more often, then again, food becomes more closer to just like kind of just food. This becomes like more fuel, and not that food ever has to be just fuel. I think food is pleasure, food is connection, food is love, food is wonderful. But it's one of other things.
One of many. I remember it was a podcast or my coach saying, like, if you're getting more than 10% of your daily joy from food, like, you need to widen your, like, how you're joy in your life, that sort of, again, and I love your idea of crowding it out, that it's like, so, oh, right. Like, I want a break. So one way to get a break might be to go have a snack. What's another way to have a break? And what's another way? And what's another? And that is so uncomfortable for us, who we've been taught that we shouldn't have needs, desires, and wants. And that's where the work is in this second part of life, is just turning back in, and it's learning about yourself. Like for me, it's been an experience. I'm like, okay, so what does a break feel like? And some days it's different and some days it's not. But again, it's that like shoulder shrugging. It's like, maybe a bath. And then I get out, I'm like, no, that felt like a chore. Okay, well, next time we'll know. Or maybe that's just today, or, it's like, it's just learning about ourselves and playing with it a little. But I like your point of us being able to meet our needs. I guess another thing I wanted to say that you're bringing to mind is this conscious choosing of it. And that we're always going to feel better with that. Like, when we are just like, when I am like, I am going to take a break, and that break is going to be ice cream, and this is my way to take a break, I'm going to feel better than if I'm just like running around like a frazzled, typical me woman. And then I'm like, all right, now I'm having the ice cream, or now I'm having the glass of wine, or now I'm having the, and then afterwards it's like, what happens? I think an easier way for me to explain that is like with social media. Like if I am like, now I'm going to sit on Instagram and look at Instagram for half an hour is up. It's like, okay, yes, I did what I said I was going to do. If I'm walking through the room, see my phone, pick it up, I'm standing there on it for half an hour, and then I'm like,
I know.
I'm like, yeah, like how bad does that feel? Same action, what you were just talking about before, same action, different. It's like totally mindful or mindless.
Yeah.
That difference to bring that to.
And that's the power of the intention, right? It's like,
Yes.
I know I really encourage my clients to plan our days one day at a time. And I don't necessarily get them to plan like every single food all they're gonna eat, but just intentions for the day. And sometimes like, then you also have standards for yourself of like, sometimes for, the food is like, well, how often do I do indulge? And so you have a little bit of a framework. So you're not always making decisions over and over again, which is really helpful. And yeah, and this is like really a big work in progress. Like it's going to take, if you have a pattern of mindless eating and sort of going to the pantry and eating like, little slivers of this or full like binge episodes or overeating, it's going to take time to become more aware. And so, and there also is going to be times where you might be really intentional for quite a while. Then all of a sudden you find yourself just like, face first in the bag, it's just in the pantry.
Yeah.
And just always recognize like it's always okay. And you can always like just stop, make the next best choice. And just have that honesty with yourself, but also the compassion, because we're humans. And you do such a great job of speaking about this too, how like we're gonna have these like it's gonna be messy. We're gonna
Yeah.
screw up, and that's okay.
Well, that's part of this, like loving ourselves, getting, you were talking about perfectionism earlier. Perfectionism is this idea that like there will be a time when we are all like good or all, all right.
Yeah.
And really reality is that we are good and bad. We make good. And so when I do something like that, I just like to, again, like shrug my shoulders and be like, shrug my shoulders and be like, well, that happened. Like I ate
Yeah.
the chocolate. And it's just this, like, where can we find kindness and nurturing of ourselves? It's like, right, not my best work, and look at that, Susie. And but it is again that intention. So I might have the intention where today it's like, right, I'm not going to eat chocolate after dinner because I've been having disrupted sleep, and I'm going to see if that is impacting my sleep. Let me see. And then tonight after dinner, my brain is going to be like, you need chocolate, and
Yeah.
that's when it's like, okay, you're having the urge, let's think, and what really feels like love to you now, sweetheart. Like let's try it, and maybe I will not have chocolate and I sleep, or maybe I won't. And then it's just again, it's like, we're humans. We're not always going to make these, the most
Totally.
skillful choices.
Totally. One thing I do with my clients, because a lot of the women I work with, you come at least originally to lose weight. We have what we call a reset worksheet, where when you like say one thing and do something else, just a little bit of a reflection tool. And it's helpful because sometimes like to have some sort of process, like a journaling process, which is just to ask the questions like, what were the triggers? What were the thoughts? Like, what were because often there's thoughts that were not true or partial truths. And so you have a way to reflect on what happened without just going into this like shame or criticism, which can just so easily get there. And I find like, yeah, like journaling and asking yourself like certain questions, not being like, oh, just don't start with like, why did I do this? Because your answer can be pretty bad, and because if it's important to you, like if it's something you want to do, I think it's worth reflecting on. And, and again, it depends kind of how important it is to you. A lot of my women that I work with, they go from, always like beating themselves up and judging themselves and hating on themselves to like, well, at least I don't beat myself up anymore, which is amazing. But we also sometimes don't get the growth unless we reflect on, the action, and just from a neutral way, like, was that the action I wanted to do?
Yeah.
And if not, then, well, what were the thought processes? Like, what were the thought errors? What were
love
the,
that.
yeah. And just so, and if it's important, like it's worth it. I mean, I don't do it every single time because it would be a lot probably to do every single time, but
It can become kind of automatic. And I really like, I mean, that's one of the happiness habits I lead people through too, with just sort of life. Like we make a plan for the day, life happens. And then at the end of the day, have a kind reflection. Like, okay, did I follow through? Oh, no, I didn't. What was going on there? Like, I like talking to myself. I like thinking of myself like 10 years older, and my wise woman being like, hey, what was going on there, Susie? Like, what did you eat? Like, so you did eat all the chocolate. And you said you were going to try not to eat chocolate tonight to like, what was going on? What were you thinking? Like, what were your,
Yeah.
what was your brain? And it's just this
In a
like,
loving way, not what were you thinking? I know
like,
what you mean. Yeah.
what else did you need? Or like, it's just this, like getting out of that judgment. I like thinking of like, we have like the inner critic in our head and then the inner coach. And it's just like, where's that coach? It's like, hey, sweetheart, it's okay. Like, I know you. You're never going to come to a session and be like, what were you doing? You missed your work. You're just like, oh, what was going on? And when people can have that in their head, and that just starting to practice that in itself in any area of their life is going to be
Totally
so helpful.
Yeah, and then you can start to become honest, because it's really easy sometimes. Like, I think that the fear is that we're afraid, not all of us, but like a lot of people, a lot of women I work with are afraid that if they become kind to themselves, they'll become complacent.
Yeah.
And it's possible to become complacent by being, when you're kind, like so that's could happen. When you're cruel to yourself, you're not usually complacent, but you just don't do it because you want to avoid your judgment. But that's where the honesty piece comes, and coming out from a place of, like we talked about curiosity and honesty, and just really like calling yourself out lovingly, because you want more for yourself. And I wish there was like a really good 3-step process to tell if you're honest or not, but I think you just got to know and do the best that you can and keep working through it.
That's sort of the learning. But yeah, I think it's like a pendulum. Like over here, we can be so rigid and mean and critical, and that's what we've been taught. And like, to be a good girl, you need to look this way, like all of that. And I definitely understand people being concerned that they're going to be complacent or too kind. And yet I always just want to bring up, there's a lot of area in the middle. And if
There
you're
is
here, and if you're honestly asking yourself, like, is this my best move? Is this the most loving move? If we're talking about food, and it's like, you can only have grapefruit for 7 days. And it's like, no, now I'm just going to eat all the cake and because that's just me being kind to myself. That's where your honesty comes in again. It's like, but is it kind? How do you actually feel after you eat that? Like, in the moment, the cake's on your lips, it feels possibly good because all your, dopamine receptors are going like, but how about 10 minutes later when you're, so it's again, yes, to just take those little steps and get started.
And I like the pendulum analogy too. And once we stop going from, like we said, if we stop swinging to like wildly from one side, then eventually we stop swinging to the other side too. We kind of just land in the middle. And it can take some time, and there's lots of shades of gray in the middle between black and white that we get to play around in. And it's messy, it's uncomfortable. It's because we sometimes like the clarity of the black and white thinking. We like the rules, we love all that because it makes it but it's not gonna get us to where we want to be for the long term. And you got to just play the long game and be patient with yourself and keep going.
Yeah, I love it. And I see another quote here you have is, so when you love something, you take care of it. So I think that some of us, that's an area we can work on, loving ourselves, loving our bodies, loving ourselves, loving, this is the body we have. And then that has been my experience, that I do take care of it in a much more different way, not a punitive way.
Yeah, it's like, you're right. The actions can be exactly the same, but the experience of those actions are completely different depending on your intention and the energy behind it. And that just changes everything. And so, yeah, like you could absolutely journal for the rest of your life. You could track food for the rest of life if you wanted to. You could weigh yourself every day for the rest of your life. And those for yourself could just be like, yeah, it's an act of self-care. And if, you go away on vacation, you don't have to scale. It's not like you're not anxious about it or scared about it. It just is, you'll be fine. But it's really just, it's really about the intention and the feeling behind everything.
Like love and leaning into, I love it. Yeah. So if listeners are like, of course, they're like, oh my God, I love this woman. So if they want to, learn more, I will put links in the show notes to things, but can you just tell us briefly, how could they get started with you?
Yeah, thank you. The best place to reach out is the podcast. I know if you listen to podcasts, you listen to podcasts. So that's, and I have a weekly show. It's I usually release on Mondays at 5 a.m. Pacific time. And it's a mix of a lot of mindset, a lot of the body science pieces as well, but just really to help you have a better relationship with yourself and to feel good in your body and to live a fit, vibrant, healthy life. And so it's called the Fit and Vibrant You podcast. Been doing it since 2015 now, so it's been a while. And then on like my website, it's TanjaShaw.com. My name is spelled with a J, TanjaShaw. And then Instagram, I'm same, Tanja Shaw. So
I will put all those links in there. And
yeah, thank you.
I think a lot of what you're saying is just this reprogramming our brain to think of ourselves and our weight and our care of ourselves in a loving way. And your podcast does a great job of doing that. I love podcasts for that reasons of just, for listeners to go over to your show and just find something that spikes their interest and just put it on and, take a walk or do your laundry or just in the background. We're trying to reprogram our brain away from this diet, punitive, mean mentality. So
yeah, and it takes repetition, right? Because other messages out there, and even if, like, I think a lot of programs are getting better at least like trying to speak nicely to yourself, but a lot of them are still just focusing, like most of them just focus on the rules, and which is like 10, you need you need some guidelines for sure. You need to do the right protocol, but that's like 10% of the work.
Because otherwise what happens when the protocol is not right? Like what I like about your work is you're not just like a fit and vibrant 2 months. You're like a fit and vibrant life. This is this is how you're going to care for yourself for life.
Exactly.
And we're the Love Your Life show. So we're all in. Thank you.
Right. It's here.
Awesome. Today. That was awesome.